Good morning. Today is March 7th, 2019, and my name is Michael Conley. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations of the North Reading Public Schools. And today I thought I would give a brief presentation on school budget revenue offsets. So I think everyone is well aware of the process that we go through and what we appropriate through the town and what the amount of funds that we receive that makes up our operating budget. But the school budget really exists of a lot more than that. We have a variety of budget revenue offsets through our revolving accounts and our state and federal grants. So in today's what I hope to be about a 10 to 12 minute presentation, I'm going to hope to kind of go through and shed a little bit more light on what some of those offsets actually are. So if you look at our revenue offsets over the last 10 years or so, you can see that the school department relies pretty heavily on pretty close to 2.5 to almost $3 million of additional revenue offsets to make up the school budget. So we certainly rely more on what the town sort of appropriates, what our fund is through property taxes and local receipts and state aid. There's an additional 2.5 to $3 million that we certainly rely on through use of our revolving accounts and the federal and state grants that we receive to really make the school department budget and to deliver the quality of services that we've come to expect here in North Reading. So as you can see, over the last 10 years or so, back in fiscal year 2012, that offset was up to like 2.5, almost $2.6 million. That was higher during that period of time, mainly because of the economic recession that was going on. You may recall President Obama had the American Recovery Reinvestment Act, and many districts received additional federal funding through what was known as kind of the ARA grant process. And that was mainly in fiscal 11 and fiscal 2012. Those funds went away in fiscal 2013, so there was that funding cliff that districts had to be mindful of, and that's why you see that dip that occurred in between 12 and 2013. In fiscal 14, we used a lot of one-time reserve or balances that had built up in many of the revolving accounts, which I'll get into in a moment, is to make that budget work that year. That was a very low increase through the appropriation of less than 2%. So that was really the result of that increase. Then things seemed to kind of level off a little over $2.3 million. FY17, you saw an increase there. That was the first year in several years that the school committee was certainly dealing with some budget challenges, and we increased some user fees. The athletic user fee went up slightly that year, the extracurricular fee, the bus transportation fee. So that led to some additional revenue. And then really over these last few years, well, you're seeing kind of an increase in revenue, and that's largely due to enrollment in the full-day kindergarten program being much higher over these last few years, resulting in additional revenue from tuition from families paying the full-day kindergarten tuition. We've also had a significant amount of special education out-of-district costs, and that North Reading has experienced that like many other communities. And that what that has done is that's kind of raised our baseline of funds that we receive through the circuit breaker program. I can get into more in a moment. So we've gotten more state revenue through the special education circuit breaker reimbursement program from having higher out-of-district costs. So when that happens, you get higher reimbursement in the subsequent of the following year, and that's raised that baseline. And that's really those are the main reasons why you're seeing a higher revenue offset these last few years. But fiscal 20, we're up to almost $2.9 million of additional revenue from these variety of sources. So one main source of this revenue is from our federal and state grants. So the district receives mainly 5 sources of revenue through federal and state grants that really work to fund a majority of different programs, in some cases staffing positions, of a variety of programs working in our special education programs, either our paraprofessionals and additional support systems in the classroom, or funds that help fund our mentorship program and other professional development opportunities. So the district receives 4 main federal sources of revenue through federal grants. Most of these grants are what is known as entitlement grants. The district is automatically eligible for these allocations on an ongoing basis. The allocations are mainly based on student demographic data. Enrollment drives a lot of these amounts that the districts receive each year. Certainly, statistics and census data of that community drive the allocation amounts, but generally, these allocation amounts don't typically change. They're relatively fixed. They don't significantly go up or down. If anything, they've gone slightly down over the last few years as demographic data has changed within the community, and just calculate of how the state and federal government calculate low income status, for instance, drive some of these numbers. And if anything, these have kind of leveled off or slightly gone down. But the district does receive what is known as an early childhood grant. A small amount of $15,000 will help offset some of the preschool personnel, staff, paraprofessionals that work with our early childhood students in the preschool program at the little school. We receive what is known as the Teacher Quality Grant that specifically helps fund the teacher mentorship program. That is partly what we're required to have a teacher mentorship program with as part of a mandate through the state. And this is a little bit of federal funding that helps us offset paying stipends to experienced teachers to help mentor our new teachers into the district. And then it also helps pay for additional professional development for our teachers. The amount of that grant is about $35,000. The next source of revenue is what is known as the Title I grant. So we have 3 schools in the district that are Title I schools that qualify for Title I funding. That would be the Hood Elementary School, the Little Elementary School, and the Middle School. So these funds specifically support student tutoring efforts, mainly in math and reading. For the eligible schools, we receive about $65,000 annually, and it's geared towards additional academic support systems, mainly in the math and reading curricular areas for these 3 eligible Title I schools. The largest piece of federal revenue from a federal grant is known as the IDEA grant, part of the No Child Left Behind legislation. We receive about $530,000 annually, and this is specifically geared towards special education expenses. And in North Reading, this grant helps support special education paraprofessionals that work in the classroom with our special education students. It helps offset special education transportation costs for students that are being transported, in most cases, outside the district to special education programs. And then additional contractual services and additional support services for students that certainly qualify. In many cases, this is applied behavioral analysis, support ABA services for students that are on the autism spectrum. It might be occupational therapy services, physical therapy services, but additional support systems for special education students is also part of this large IDEA federal grant, which brings in a little over $500,000. The next piece of revenue is actually state funded, and that is the state circuit breaker program. We have a special education out of district tuition costs, and this program helps reimburse those out of district tuition costs. So the circuit breaker state program is designed to assist districts with providing a level of reimbursement, typically between 65 and 75%, for special education tuition costs that are above a specific threshold. which is typically 4 times the state average foundation budget. So in FY20, that the approximate amount of that is about $44,000. So when we have a particular student that is in an out of district program that is costing greater than $44,000, which in most cases is the case, we receive between 65 and 75% of that cost that is above that threshold of $44,000. And that brings in about $750,000 of revenue on an annual basis. And as I stated earlier, that baseline has raised over the last few years because of a variety of reasons. Students with more intense needs that have been in more costly out-of-district placements, that reimbursement baseline has gotten higher. So these are the main sources of revenue that make up the chart I showed you earlier from federal and state grants. We also have our revolving account. So I know many parents and members of the community and various stakeholders also wonder. I know we're paying fees. I know we're assessed user fees for many of the optional programs like athletics at the high school, the opportunity to participate in extracurricular student clubs and activities at the middle school and high school, the ability to participate in performing arts programs like theater and music. Some families that don't qualify for free busing that live within the 2 miles or between grades kindergarten through grade 6 or grade 7 through 12, who opt to participate in the optional busing program, pay a user fee. We assess some rental user fee costs for either outside agencies or folks that are renting our facilities. And then we have the tuition-based program, the full-day kindergarten and preschool tuitions. So we have a variety of user fees and tuitions that we are collecting on an ongoing annual basis. And many times the question is, what is this revenue supporting and funding? And what this chart indicates is that we do take in a little over about $1.4 million annually, and it does directly offset those direct costs associated with those programs and does directly offset the school's operating budget request to the town. So from the athletic standpoint, it's offsetting athletic expenses, coaches, transportation, supplies, ice rental, anything associated to run the athletic program. That user fee and gate receipts would be the funding source that directly offsets that amount. We count on about $300,000 annually. The user fee that we assess for student club advisors, for student participation in student clubs at the middle school and the high school, directly offsets the costs of student club advisor stipends that are in the teacher contract. The performing arts user fee that begin this year, again, directly offsets stipends for those professional staff working in our theater and music programs. The user fee assessed for busing directly offsets that regular transportation contract. Just so everyone knows is that we run 10 buses every day at each level through the 3 elementary schools and at the middle school and the high school. If we looked at all those families that are greater than 2 miles and live in grades kindergarten through 6, and if we only bused what we were required to bus by law, we would be operating about 5 buses every day. So then we allow or running optional busing program that families that wish to be transported via bus to school, and they pay a user fee, and that cost helps support the additional cost of the 5 other buses that we operate every day to meet the demands of the optional busing program. So we take in about $275,000 of revenue annually. The facility rental program, we do rent space to outside groups, to some youth basketball programs, volleyball, and a variety of groups that we work with both in town and out of town. That revenue helps that we bring in directly helps offset maintenance and upkeep costs associated with renting that space. We also bring in revenue through the full-day kindergarten program, and we assess the tuition, and that helps offset the direct costs of the teachers and paraprofessionals working within our full-day kindergarten program. And then we do charge a preschool half-day and full-day K tuition, and that helps offset our preschool teachers working in that program at the Little Elementary School. So if you look at the revolving accounts in a little more detail, you can see what the FY20 direct costs are projected to be in our budget, our preliminary FY20 budget. And the annual user fee contribution that I just spoke of in the prior slide. And what you can see is that in most cases, the amount of that we are collecting from either a user fee or a tuition does not quite even match the amount of 50% of that cost. So on average, if you go through and look at all these 6 different programs, we're at about 48% of that cost is offset by the user fee that is being assessed to families and parents to participate in what these optional programs are. So in a perfect world, I think we would all agree that there would not be any user fees or tuitions charged. These would all be kind of free and part of the budget, but North Reading is very similar to many other communities and districts across the Commonwealth, and we do assess a user fee or tuition cost for these optional programs. But as you can see, in most cases, the cost is a little under 50% of what we're actually paying, and we're right at about 48%. So the difference that the user fee and the tuition revenue does not cover, those funds are coming out of the local operating budget, and that's appropriated through the town through our operating budget request. So you look at FY20, what is our general fund request? What are we asking the town to appropriate through revenue, through local property taxes, through local receipts, through our state aid? And we are asking for a $32,083,320 budget. That's what is being proposed, and that would be a 4.3% increase. As I showed you earlier, the difference, the other between the state and federal grants and the revolving account revenue that I just went through in the last few slides make up an additional $2.9 million. So in reality, our total school funds is a little over $34,900,000 when you look at what we're asking the town to appropriate through the general fund and what we are also taking in additional revenue sources through our state and federal grants and our revolving accounts through the user fees and the tuitions that we do assess for our optional programs. That also doesn't fully tell the full story, because we then also have the generous work of our parent and our support groups that work on behalf of many of our schools and our athletic and music and performing arts programs. We bring in an additional $75,000 for just the PTO, the 5 PTO school groups and their budgets, who offset enrichment programs, class field trips, classroom supplies on an ongoing basis. And the school committee accepts annually, on average, $250,000 of additional revenue from either private donors or donations from our athletic groups, performing arts support groups, booster groups that do exist to help support many of these extracurricular athletic programs, as well as technology and a variety of sources that we receive very generous donations on an ongoing basis. So that also is part of the picture to make the North Reading educational experience is what it is today. So hope that sheds some light on the school budget subsidies and revenue offsets that make up school budget. And we are still in the midst of our FY20 budget process, and here are some key dates. We are set to present the FY20 preliminary budget on March 18th. March 28th is a school budget webinar that myself and Superintendent Bernard will be conducting. April 8th is the annual budget public hearing. That will kick off at 6:30 in the Distance Learning Lab at the middle school and the high school. And then we have the school committee budget vote at their regular scheduled meeting on Monday, April 29th. And then June 10th is the annual town meeting. So it's been about 20 minutes, went a little bit more than I expected, but I hope this sheds some light and provides some additional information. Again, most of this information can also be found on the district website under the link for budget. And I hope this was helpful, and I hope to see each of you at one of these upcoming meetings over the next several weeks. Great, thank you.